He wasn't just famous, he was the reason gods had voices. A jawline built for judgment, a voice made of thunder, a presence you didn't direct, you obeyed. Charlton Heston didn't play men, he played monuments, Moses, Ben-Hur, El Cid, Michelangelo. He didn't audition for greatness, he arrived with it. The screen didn't discover him, it surrendered. He stood like prophecy in motion, steel in his spine, stone in his silence. He didn't perform, he declared. And then he began to forget. Not in headlines, not in drama, but in the quiet way a myth begins to fade. He forgot the names, the scenes, the stories. The hand that once raised commandments began to tremble. The voice that once led armies began to drift. And the world, the same world that made him immortal, looked away. Except for two shadows, Fraser, Holly, not children, not yet. Just silhouettes inside a legend unraveling. They didn't chase the spotlight, they guarded what was left of it. They didn't speak, they stayed. Because when your father plays gods, you learn how to carry silence like a shield. If you believe some legacies are kept alive in whispers, not words, subscribe to our channel and let the forgotten be remembered with dignity. He wasn't born into childhood. He was born into a script. Fraser Clark Heston, February 12, 1955. Los Angeles, 3 months old and already cast. A basket, a river, a prophecy. He played baby Moses in the 10 Commandments. His father lifted him on screen not as dad, but as deliverer. No rehearsal, no audition. Just legacy before memory. He didn't enter the industry, he arrived as an offering. Before he spoke, he was sacred. Before he could walk, he was a symbol. He never chose the spotlight, it chose him. And yet, he stepped back. Charlton joked, he retired from acting at 3 months with perfect judgment. But the line carried truth. Fraser wasn't chasing applause, he was studying silence. He didn't dream of fame, he wanted to understand it. Even then, a son not meant to become his father, but to walk beside him. Because some are born to lead stories, others are born to protect the one they came from. He didn't grow up in a neighborhood. He grew up on a set, not playgrounds backlots, not fairy tales script pages. He watched armies ride by before he learned to ride a bike. He saw cities fall before he lost a tooth. His home was wherever the next scene began. Costume trailers, dust, cables under sand, and always his father, draped in history. One day a prophet, the next a king, lines in Latin, scenes in smoke. Fraser didn't see magic, he saw the machinery behind it, the takes, the edits, the silence between action and cut. He didn't dream of being watched, he was too busy watching. His mother, Lydia, called it ruin running. Trips to Petra, to ancient temples, to bones buried in sun. While others learned spelling, Fraser was reading the walls of old empires. History didn't live in books, it lived in his family. He didn't pretend to be someone else. He studied how his father became everyone else, and slowly, something in him turned inward. He didn't want to be seen. He wanted to shape what others see. Because some children grow up inside legends and decide never to stand in front of one. He never tried to escape the myth. He studied how to hold it, not by acting, by shaping. Fraser didn't chase scenes, he wrote them. Wind River, his first screenplay, a story of wilderness, silence, survival. It became a film, The Mountain Men, starring his father. He wasn't proving anything, he was preserving something. He didn't direct to be seen, he directed to remember. Mother Lode, Treasure Island, Needful Things, roles for Charlton, rooms for Legacy, and always his hand just off screen, making sure the light still reached him. He built Agamemnon Films, not as a spotlight, but as a shrine, a place to protect what time forgets. He understood his father was fading, but he also knew film doesn't. Frame by frame, he carved out space for the man the world once called immortal. Because some suns don't carry torches, they build the halls where fire can live forever. She wasn't born into the spotlight, she was brought home to a house already glowing from it. Holly Ann Heston, adopted in 1961. No casting, no fanfare, just presence. She didn't grow up on set. She grew up on the sidelines of a legend. Fraser lived among scripts. Holly lived among shadows. Not hidden, just still. She didn't answer questions. She listened to people who never got to ask them. She chose social work, psychology, healing over noise, Monmouth University, a master's degree. She became a therapist for trauma, addiction, the invisible griefs. While the world remembered Charlton for his fire, Holly walked into rooms where pain had no name and stayed until it did. She never performed. She practiced. No interviews, no memoir. Just a life of service built quietly in the shadow of myth. Because some daughters don't inherit the spotlight. They inherit the silence that follows it, and they learn how to make it sacred. There was no press, no tribute gala, no red carpet goodbye, just family, a chapel, a man the world had already started to forget. April 5th, 2008, Charlton Heston passed away, at home, with Lydia beside him, with memory long gone, but love still present. No camera followed, no microphone waited. And then, Holly stepped forward. The daughter who never asked to be seen stood where legends are laid to rest. No tears on cue, no headline lines. She read from Tennyson. She read from Shakespeare. The poems her father once carried now carried him. She didn't speak of box office. She didn't list roles. She gave him what fame never could. Closure. With grace, without spectacle. She didn't speak for the world. She spoke for the man behind it. Because some daughters don't say much in life, so when they do, you listen. They didn't vanish. They stepped back. Not in bitterness, in reverence. No memoir, no interviews, no tour of grief. Just dignity and distance. Fraser made fewer films, fewer calls. He stayed near, not as a director, as a son. Holly continued her work in therapy, behind closed doors, off camera, helping people walk out of their own darkness. While others traded legacy for headlines, they traded silence for peace. They could have spoken. They didn't. They could have shared. They guarded. The story belonged to the man who could no longer tell it, and they made sure no one else would twist it. They didn't perform grief. They carried it. They didn't rehearse love. They lived it. Because some children don't need to be remembered. They need to remember and do it right. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. One name misplaced, one line lost. A script he'd once memorized now felt like a stranger. In 2002, he stood before the world and said the word himself. Alzheimer's. I will insist on being who I am. But that was the tragedy, because who he was already slipping away. The man who held back armies couldn't find the right fork. The voice that roared through history faded into pauses and blank stares. The world called him a warrior, but this was not a battle he could win. And still, they never left. Fraser didn't try to remind him, he just stayed. Holly didn't correct the lapses, she softened them. They didn't document it, they protected it. No photos, no exposés, no spectacle. They covered him in silence, not to hide the decline, but to hold the dignity. Because when memory dissolves, what's left is who stood beside you. Memory may fade, but silence remembers everything. There were no more premieres, no more cameras, no more lines, only quiet. And two children who never asked for the stage but now held the scene. Fraser stopped chasing credits. He stayed home, stayed near. He didn't direct, he protected. Holly didn't speak to audiences. She spoke to patience. Pan that had no applause, only weight. Their lives became smaller, not in meaning, but in noise. They turned down opportunities and turned toward what mattered. Sitting beside him, reading pages he once memorized, smiling through repetition. holding space where memory used to live. They didn't write a legacy. They held it in their hands like something breakable. There was no announcement, no broadcast, just a slow, faithful silence from a family that knew how to love him, even as he slipped away. Because some farewells don't happen in a moment, they happen over years. He didn't become a star, he became a steward, not of fame of memory. Fraser didn't speak often, but when he did, he chose words like tools, precise, purposeful. He gave interviews, but only to protect legacy, never to benefit from it. He built Agamemnon Films to keep his father's voice alive, not recycled, respected. He directed projects with intention, chose stories with care, stories his father could carry, even as the world moved on. Treasure Island, the crucifer of blood, needful things, each one a space for Charlton to still exist, not as myth, but as man. He oversaw re-releases, attended dedications, spoke when no one else could. At the Charlton Heston postage stamp unveiling, Fraser stood still not as heir, but as guardian. He once said his father was tolerant, artistic, loving. 3 words the world never put on posters, but Fraser remembered them, and that was enough. Because some sons don't build careers, they build temples, quietly, patiently, completely. She didn't follow the spotlight, she followed suffering, not her own, everyone else's. Holly chose a path where no one asks for autographs, just help. She became a therapist, by training, by instinct, by necessity, grief, addiction, trauma. She sat across from people the world ignored and made them feel seen. In a quiet New Jersey room, she once sat across from a woman who couldn't speak and waited until she could. No headlines, no legacy statements, just real work, quiet work, every single day. She spoke only when it mattered. She gave one interview about the family's art collection, said little, said everything, spoke of memory as something fragile but worth keeping. She read at her father's funeral. She read what he loved, and then she disappeared again. Not because she was hiding, because her presence was never meant to be public. She wasn't a performer, she was a healer. Because some daughters don't hold microphones, they hold space. And some legacies are protected not by fire, but by listening. They weren't raised on sets. They were raised on stories, not in the middle of a legend, but just after it faded. They didn't grow up chasing cameras. They grew up remembering why their family walked away from them. Jack Alexander Clark Heston, Fraser's son, raised far from Los Angeles, far from studios, far from flashbulbs. A quiet life in British Columbia, close to nature, closer to truth. He doesn't act, he doesn't direct, he doesn't perform, he lives, and that is enough. Ridley Rochelle, Holly's daughter, graduated from Northwestern University, the same school her grandfather once attended, now building a life in the arts. Not as star, as curator, as steward. She doesn't use the name. She honors the weight of it, not for platform, for meaning. They don't chase legacy, they trace it. No documentaries, no memoirs, no declarations, just presence. Because some grandchildren don't reignite the myth. They carry it without letting it consume them. They don't perform, they protect. Jack's life in the wild mirrored Fraser's retreat from fame. Ridley's careful curation reflected Holly's invisible stewardship. They don't rise for the applause. They walk quietly with the memory of who he was before the world decided what he meant. He once led nations across deserts, stared down tyrants, held the tablets of God. His voice carried prophecy. His presence commanded awe, but death does not care for roles nor for legends. And when it came, there was no final line, no heroic ending, only silence. April 5th, 2008, Charlton Heston passed away, at home, with Lydia beside him, with Fraser and Holly nearby. No cameras, no curtain call, just stillness. The myth was already fading, but the man was held. Fraser didn't direct the moment, he lived it. Holly didn't narrate it, she honored it. They didn't try to resurrect a role, they let a father go. Not with headlines, with hands, with presence. He didn't die as Moses, or Ben-Hur, or any of the gods he once became. He died as dad, as husband, as a man whose memory had left him, but whose family never did. Because when giants fall, only those closest can carry the pieces. They didn't inherit the spotlight, they inherited the silence that followed it. Fraser didn't perform legacy, he protected it. Holly didn't echo greatness, she absorbed its cost. They didn't try to become their father, they became the reason he could leave with dignity. No press, no chaos, no spectacle, just presence. The world remembered him as Moses, as Judah Ben-Hur, as a face carved in history, but they remembered the man who forgot his lines, the man who drifted and needed someone to hold what was slipping. They didn't resent it, they didn't run from it, they stayed. Because some children aren't heirs, they're guardians of memory, of meaning, of moments the public never sees. They let the myth go, but kept the man, and in doing so, they gave him something greater than immortality. They gave him rest. If you believe some legends are carried in silence, not shouted in light, carry this one with you. Subscribe to our channel and let the forgotten be remembered with grace.